Hi, my name is Lew-Douglas, and I will be going over equity-minded and culturally affirming teaching and learning, the overview from the webinar that we watched this week. So the big ideas that they shared in this webinar were equity, going beyond equality, providing equal resources, but eradicating the disparities between students. And then another concept was teachers teach the way they were taught. So there's a need for self-evaluation. I kind of personally went over that as how was I taught? How did I wish I was taught? How do I want to be taught now? How do I want to teach my own classroom in person? And should there be a virtual platform? And just having that relate to how I would encounter my students. And then another big idea was even in online classes, diversity is still important. Just because you transition from face to face, there might be black screens or gray screens, pictures or no pictures. Disparities still exist and they're still the same regardless of the platform. So next, implications for K through 12 education of at least going online. The transition to online school caused a lot of students to feel invisible online. If it's hard enough to be seen physically in your classroom, how much more when everyone's cameras are off, their mics are off, and you don't feel like you can have real relationships with the teachers and with your classmates. So there was a lot of invisibility. There was a lack of accessibility and resources for students. And that was one of the things that the um, speakers mentioned was they may not have the resources like computers at home or Wi-Fi at home. So they need to go to the library. And then sometimes the library computers are taken. So they need lectures and lessons to be accessible on their phones. So there's so many disparities um, that we may not initially think of, but that need to be considered for online school as well. One of the quotes that stuck out to me during the webinar was, without a lens of equity, we have a lens of oppression. And if we're not actively seeking out to not only create equality, but equity within the classroom, there is going to be a demographic, a group of students who are going to feel marginalized, who are not going to feel heard or seen, and may not be reflected in the course content we're teaching and how we're teaching because we're not addressing them properly. Lastly, can the big ideas mentioned before be applied and extended to other aspects of diversity and equity? I kind of wanted to go over the big ideas that they went over after my second slide. They had 5 strategies. I wanted to talk about the two. The first one was interesting to me, be intrusive. When I saw that, I was like, oh no, be intrusive. That doesn't sound good. But what they really meant was meet students where they are and don't expect them to come to you first, but be comfortable initiating, knowing what their resources are or their lack of resources so that you can meet them in the middle. Being flexible because we know life happens, maybe their Wi-Fi cut out or they need recorded sessions because they can't come exactly on time because they have responsibilities at home, etc. So I thought that that last part of being flexible, being able to allow students to submit assignments in different platforms, allowing them to be creative, in addition to being flexible, that struck me as something that could also carry out for in-person classes in terms of diversity and equity for students with disabilities who may not be able to either physically perform an assignment the way that their peers might, or they're just divergent learners and want to show their learning in a different way, whether it be video, essay, you name it, just something different, and being flexible online and in person is important. Lastly, being relational, that goes across all fields, other aspects of diversity. We're always going to want to be relational as teachers. They may not always like your content or the subject because they're not inclined to, they might like something else. But hopefully they'll always like you as a teacher because you're trying to be relational, being authentically invested, and getting to humanize yourself and getting on their level so that they can be on yours. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you. And